What is occurring? What actually happens in reality, in behavior, in decision making, to decision making, in behavior, to break through the liar lid once the distortion has occurred. The distortions will occur. That's one of the assumptions here is that it's part of the process of of development. It's part of the process of it's part of the journey. They will occur. The question is, are those gaps shorter? So, what actually happens when a leader realizes something is off, or what has to happen to break through? What to look for, what to be aware of that in the environment from inputs that for one to be aware of from an input standpoint that could be that can influence, right? That influence um, that influence attention in a way that takes the leader off of the goal or takes their attention away from the goal. Silence in a meeting. The silence is deafening, right? How customers, how customers address feedback or give feedback that it's even given. Right? Is feedback giving willingly and unasked for, or is it asked for? Well, it's going to have to be asked for. It's if how they complain is a better way. How the customers complain, because customers are not going to give feedback major, by and large, they're not going to give unasked for feedback that's putting too much unless there's a serious problem and something is impacting them in their identity because there's in giving feedback, unasked for feedback, there connotes a shame, connotes a degree of responsibility, the ability to respond, back to what comes after you give it. And so it's the organization's responsibility to actually not just be open for feedback, but have systems in place to ask for and gain feedback. And upon receiving that feedback, do something about it, do something with it. There's nothing, there's something that disrespects the customer relationship is to ask for feedback, receive it, and then for things not to change. That that creates a confusion where the customers think they're a part of that. They have their ownership in that co-creation. And then there's nothing changes. It's makes it even worse on that. And so what does it actually look like in behavior and decision making to break the liar lid once distortion has begun? That's the question. I think it starts with the question. Like, and the quality of our questions are have a relationship with our intent. And if we want to improve, we want to get better, we want to sacrifice, we want to work, to strive, to be in pursuit of a goal, the questions will reflect that desire, that wantingness, that commitment. And leaders along the journey of Entrepreneurs, along, I keep using that word interchangeably. It could be confusing to people. The entrepreneurs, the entrepreneur can lose their their way along the way, achieving the goal, the original goal that's set out, can have a can and does have an undermining, um, a disincentivizing impact on the entrepreneur where they need a renewal. That's where, you know, a new aim, a new goal, a new mission to continue the pursuit of entrepreneurship. I think this is where the value of communities come in, where the pursuit of learning, the this is actually where negative incentives come in. The negative incentives, that goes back to the deficit. It's like what actually influences and pushes people forward. It's lack. It's not having or not feeling as though they have enough. That is that is a necessary a necessary part of moving towards a goal is to actually have a feeling and a real need pushing pushing the entrepreneur, pushing them forward. The Why can it be so hard to admit when we're wrong? There's more to lose the higher we are in the hierarchy. This is the test of character. There's more, there's reputational, just like there's organizations, like the larger that they grow, they have to take more risk to get the same amount of return. But they've got more, yeah, they've got to take more risk to get the same amount of return as competitors that may be in a position to take less risk and get a greater return. But why? Because they're smaller. They have less to lose. They have less to lose. Now, interestingly enough, those that are in that position aren't feeling that they naturally that they have less to lose and more to gain because we're talking about it being more on an individual level, an identity level for an organization. It's a cultural level. It has its own identity, which is the culture, and it's got more to losing, less to gain. And individuals that have those. So this is where they answer the question. It's like why breaking the liar lid is so important is because people in positions of at the highest, they have they run the risk of losing their authority, their reputation, control, their identity that they've been given. Right? It hasn't been created from them. So that's the difference between like a founder, an entrepreneur, and someone that's been placed or at the helm of an institution. That the entrepreneur is co-creating that identity and in inspired that their actions over time led to that authority and that reputation. For anyone, it's hard. It's naturally going to be hard to admit when we're wrong or recognize we might be wrong at the risk of reputation, authority, control. This is where advisors and mentors really earn their keep. And at the same time, if they're the only place for that, if if the professionals that serve the system are the only place where that self-acknowledgement, that understanding, that vulnerability is taking place, then that actually undermines and negates the very vulnerability that is quote unquote taking place. This is where the team comes in. The a person that is in a position of authority that's including the team, what what might be going wrong and what may what could we be doing better is is inviting that conversation. They're transcending the hierarchy, they're transcending the authority, and they're it's almost like they're bending over, they're bending an ear to get a response, and there's a lifting up of the people that are below them that are looking up. And now it's being done together. There's a team cohesion. There's a team camaraderie. It's the for the it's the individual in the position of authority and influence's implicit role to lean in, to lift up without words, but through actions, through behaviors, through relationship, so that it doesn't feel like top down. It is bottom up. But why is it so hard to break the liar lid? Because identity is at risk, authority is at risk, reputation is at risk, control is at risk. I think there is a connection with disengaged leadership and vulnerability and openness and inclusion. When people are in positions of power, when people in positions of power are not doing what they're supposed to be doing, there's less likelihood that there will be courage to overcome the possibility of failure. There will be fear of losing authority, fear of attachment to reputation, necessity of control. This is why I think, as an example, Warren Buffett picked the leaders of the companies he bought and decided their compensation. Those are the two things. They're looking for a person that, this is my interpretation of it, a person that they believe can get the job done, would be willing to get the job done, and then they want to be able to incentivize the conditions, incentivize economic conditions to push them forward. And when I say they, Warren and Charlie and the like, and Warren and Charlie and all of the disciples curated, and I'll explain disciples, curated an environment that that in, that influences, that course corrects, that they developed enough over time feedback loops, mechanisms of accountability through the stories that they told, and the language that they use, and how they live their life congruent to those stories. And the disciple piece, meaning the more and more companies that people and companies that families that bought the stock, and in turn either bought the stock and then sold their businesses to it after the fact, or sold their businesses to and held their stock and showed up to the meetings and read the literature and read the books and prescribed by that way of living life is more and more conditions outside of just choosing the right person and setting their pay and then kind of um, letting it take place. They were focused on the and then just showing up and living in it, living the philosophy that it was that they taught. That created this unbelievable um, culture of cultures, an ecology of businesses, but operating on their 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 operating system or operating through their software by articulating and codifying and living out their operating system in their through their own through each unique company's own way of saying and holding to account and modeling their their operating system because they focused on the software. And a big part of that software working was when they would bring in a new when they would launch a new product, being meaning an acquisition, because the acquisition is the product. They're constantly updating the software. They're updating the software by showing up, right? That every year that meeting, the annual is like it's like a software update. Every meeting, every year, the annual is a software update. Similar questions, similar answers, focused on the results that all year long focusing on protecting the culture by living the values. There's constant attention on what is most important, what's highest. And so the intentions are believed in, and it just compounds and compounds and compounds. And much of the values created over time. But because in that case, one leader it has their attention on the empire, on the ecosystem, the entire time. That's like step one. The question from there is what happens when that person is gone? Right? And that's where Berkshire's at now. It's had one leader for the entire time, living the doctrine, living the and modeling and architecting the culture through picking through picking the through picking businesses that fit its its operating thesis that would infer the core values that align with its software and setting the pay by being in control of the pay that impacts what people pay attention to. It's weird. I So all this to say, why is breaking the liar lid so hard? It takes, well, because there's a lot to lose. Authority, identity, reputation, control, and that And that is, what if that is, so that's one of the claims that that is terrifying relative to how engaged they are in the first place. And disengagement may be a natural part of the growth of an organization because the structures break and right that it's like going through a growth spurt is painful because the bones are actually growing. There's pain in that. And when they if you break if someone breaks a leg and it heals, it's gonna grow back stronger. But there's going to be pain and a process of healing and a lot of attention on the wound to make sure it grows back even the right way accordingly. Observable behaviors to break the liar lid would be asking more questions than making statements, inviting contradiction publicly, and 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 being able to decide through that. Sl slowing decisions, slowing decisions to reassess inputs, ta watering. Don't water the weeds and cut the flowers. Cut the weeds and water the flowers. Re-engage directly with customers. Bring in outside perspectives and but view them as bring in outside perspectives and view them as leverage, not as something to, this is a funny word, but worship. I mean, don't hold them highest. Hold the endeavor to gain information from them highest. Don't seek their approval, seek their information. Don't seek their approval, seek their information. Reopening previous closed decisions, being willing to look back is a signal of awareness, but that doesn't mean holding on to. That doesn't mean avoiding a decision based on overwhelming choice, but a willingness to look back while moving forward. It's that, you know, Soren Kierkegaard. I love this. Life can only be understood backwards, but that the but is in all capital, must be lived forwards. And more dialogue doesn't mean more meetings. More dialogue means, I think more dialogue makes less meetings. More dialogue is less meetings, shorter meetings, more energy going outside of the system. It's talking less to itself, but what it's saying is more is faster and clearer. So there's more dialogue in the system, less dialogue outside of the system. That energy is flowing within the system, and people are transmitting that energy through what they're doing and what they're not doing in their behavior and how they're communicating the messaging out there to the world. So the focus goes back or is on the customer, and is the focus internally is in relation to the customer. It's talking about them, not talking about pontificating about competition, but communicating around customer. Feedback's loop will open up then, and it won't be so personal and feel so personal. It will be inspiring and clarifying. The cost of breaking the lid, the cost of breaking the lid short term is loss of control, slower short term performance, internal conflict increasing. Absolutely. All the things that one would be afraid of. And then, pe people who have benefited from the distortion resist. So there'll be conflict. However, if it's not broken, the culture will collapse. Talent leaves, customers disengage, decisions become performances, but not they don't amount to anything. So it is the path forward. That it is the path forward. How do you know when to hold an opinion and when to break it? That's part of the reason why people in positions of authority and influence they have so much responsibility is that the nuance where they live making these decisions have the biggest costs. If they don't happen, the whole civilization can collapse. When they do happen, and they happen in ways that are true, is that ways that are true, that are clear, that are that are aligned, it creates value, it creates opportunity. And there's so many reasons why everyone within a system, a business system, competitors are facing headwinds, and those that can face them true and together as one have competitive advantages against those that they're competing with. And life life gets in the way. Like life is a part of it. It's like how this has been from day one. It's like how we actually live our lives impacts the cultures that we have. How we how leaders live their lives impacts the culture that they have. How this is where the family systems come into play. How the actual entrepreneurs are living their lives impacts the cultures of their organization, bar none. And I think as technology advances, it's making this more and more heightened or more and more clear because of all those Chinese walls coming down. The purpose of a business is to create and keep a customer.